Artemis II proved we can send a crew around the moon and back. The logical next step would be the landing, but Artemis III is actually staying in orbit around the Earth. NASA is framing this as a modern-day Apollo 9. In 1969, before taking the lunar module to the surface, that crew stayed in low Earth orbit to run a full dress rehearsal of the hardware. NASA says Artemis III is that same necessary safety check. The mission architecture is designed for efficiency. The SLS rocket provides enough thrust to push the Orion capsule into orbit on its own, which allows NASA to save the final upper stage for the actual moon landing on Artemis IV. Once in orbit, the Orion will rendezvous and dock with a commercial lander. The crew is scheduled to spend several days inside the vehicle, testing the life support systems and the airlocks to basic plumbing and waste management. This narrative paints Artemis III as a conservative, equipment-first checkout. It is a plan built on the idea that testing hardware in a safe environment is the only way to find the minor issues that could end a multi-billion-dollar mission. However, NASA recently made a significant change to the flight plan. They announced they will proceed with the Artemis III launch even if the commercial landers aren't ready for the astronauts to actually enter. This creates a major gap in the mission's logic. If the astronauts never step foot inside the lander, the primary reason for a dress rehearsal, testing the hardware, disappears. This shift in the schedule changes the mission's priority. By removing the lander as a requirement for launch, Artemis III moves from a hardware test to a high-stakes assessment of the companies building it. NASA is essentially using this orbital flight as a filter, forcing two private spaceflight companies to compete for the right to perform the actual moon landing. The vehicles in this competition are behemoths. SpaceX's Starship HLS and Blue Origin's Blue Moon Mark II are massive, multi-story structures that dwarf the original Apollo lunar module. The rivalry intensified after NASA awarded the first landing contract exclusively to SpaceX, triggering immediate pushback from the rest of the industry. Blue Origin responded with lawsuits, and Jeff Bezos offered billions in personal funding to stay in the game. Meanwhile, SpaceX began missing key development milestones, causing the project's timeline to slip. In response to these delays, NASA reopened the contract with a new, blunt condition. Whoever gets their hardware to the launch pad first wins the right to execute the Artemis IV moon landing. Artemis III has become the finish line for that sprint. It forces the world's two wealthiest men to pit their resources against each other to meet NASA's schedule. Friction between the partners also exists in the software and the cockpit. Artemis III is where NASA plans to resolve deep operational disputes with its private contractors. For example, the Inspector General has documented a disagreement over autonomy. SpaceX has designed its lander to be fully automated, but NASA demands that the crew maintain the ability to take manual control at any time. That requirement comes from historical experience. On Apollo 11, Neil Armstrong realized the autopilot was heading toward a boulder field. He took manual control and steered the module to a clear spot, saving the mission and the crew. Artemis III forces these philosophical differences into a live environment. By testing these procedures in Earth's orbit, NASA can ensure their private partners are willing to adapt to their safety standards before attempting a landing. Ultimately, this mission provides an evaluation of the partnership itself, testing if commercial tech cultures can successfully integrate with NASA's rigorous oversight. Adjusted for inflation, Apollo spent roughly $300 billion to reach the moon. For the Artemis landers, NASA is spending just $7 billion. They're asking these companies to build exponentially larger, fully reusable spacecraft for a fraction of the budget. To bridge that gap, NASA is turning the mission into a public event. They have issued formal requests for technology that will allow them to broadcast the entire orbital test in real-time, high-definition video to millions of viewers. Without the unlimited budget of the 1960s, NASA's path to the moon relies on turning this test flight into a competitive showcase to get the most out of their private partners. Relying on experimental, underfunded commercial tech leads to the one thing NASA cannot fully control: the timeline. While NASA officially targets 2027, the scale of the refueling and orbital transfer tests suggests Artemis III will likely move to 2028, pushing the first moon landing of this century to 2030 or later. The payoff for that wait is the scale of the mission. When the winner of Artemis III finally lands, they won't be bringing a tiny, disposable module. They'll be delivering the foundation for a permanent base. Artemis III serves as the definitive test for these partnerships. It ensures that before NASA attempts to touch the lunar surface, they know exactly which company is prepared to lead the way.